Hello and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another Historical Humans Reacts. And on today's episode, we're talking about something close to our own hearts, something close to home. The Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago gets a brand new name.
Yay. Some of us not really enthused about this, but don't worry, there is a whole story behind it. You see, if we rewind the clock back to a foreign and ancient time, before we all had to spend,
Years
year
in
of our
prison.
lives locked inside our homes. Um,
C-19.
yeah, yeah. In the year of 2019 of yore, uh, a, a man by the name of Ken Griffin.
Kenneth C. Griffin.
Yeah. Uh, Donated 125 million US dollars to the Museum of Science and Industry.
Which is a massive donation, but Griffin is the CEO of Citadel Hedge Fund, so they're a money management corporation. And yeah, one of the ways he manages to do his tax write-offs and his tax systems is to do large donations like this. And one of the things we talk about in our museum studies and museology courses is the large number of donation, like how, what do you get for making a donation, one, and two, what is the like thresholds you want to go for. And to be quite frank, a donation as large as 125 million, you basically get your run of the building in my opinion. I mean, that is
Yeah,
a very large
yeah,
large
it
sum.
is. It is a very large donation. Uh, the Museum of Science and Industry has been in operation since 1933, and this is the single largest donation the museum has ever received. Now, for his $125 million, Mr. Griffin received a a new what is it called? Digital art gallery for the Museum of Science and Industry
A
that
one of a
get
kind immersive digital gallery.
yeah that that he gets to be attributed to or have attributed to him, and he also gets to have his name become the name of the museum itself. That's right. The Museum of Science and Industry, as of 2024, is officially undergoing rebranding to not be the Museum of Science and Industry, but to be the Ken Griffin Museum
Well,
of
not.
Science and Industry.
Yeah, I was gonna say, don't be a little too baity there. It's the Kenneth C.
Yeah,
Griffin Museum of Science and Industry, which is a mouthful. And
yeah,
here in Chicago, we know how much we love renaming and rebranding
mhm,
of things. Just
yeah,
ask people who go visit the Sears Tower or go watch a game at Kaminsky.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, say the words right. Got to watch you there.
Or even
But
the cell, like you can
yeah,
use,
yeah.
we don't go to change very easily.
Yeah, it's just one of those things that like you always know that on all the paperwork and the pamphlets and everything, it's not going to be the MSI anymore. It's going to be the Griffin Museum, and that has rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, and is led to us here having discussion. Well, what should you get for $125 million? What does that entitle you to? Personally, I don't really think you should be rebranding the entire name of your museum based on a donation. I see giving people gallery names, wing names, things like that. But to completely change your brand as the museum for a donation feels like a poor business move on your part, simply because if your brand changes too often, you you start to fall apart in terms of your cohesion
See,
as bigger donations come in.
I strongly disagree.
Yeah,
100% vehemently
go go
disagree.
go for it.
I very much think that as an institution, as a museum, your funding is such a stringent thing, especially as a private nonprofit. Like, you're not trying to earn as much money as possible, you're just trying to cover your budget and your expenses to keep the building open and running. And to have such a large sum of money instantly be deposited into your accounts, like, that really is securing the future.
Yeah,
They're doing a
and
trade
I
off. They're
yeah,
losing a little bit of marketing. They're still maintaining the Museum of Science and Industry. You're just adding effectively what's like a little tag at the beginning of everything. You're just adding his name, but he paid for that right. It is a marketing spot. It is a financial decision to effectively it's an ego thing for him. It's cementing his
Yeah,
legacy.
yeah, which is great. Good for Mr. Griffin. He had the money to do this, and he did. Um, the the thing is, like, with a lot of museums, what a lot of people don't realize is how close a lot of things are to shutting off. How expensive it is to maintain temperature controls and air controls and all the other things that are very expensive that you need to keep a lot of stuff from deteriorating. And you know that all costs. You have to get all there. I agree with you 100% there that donations and title use stuff. I personally tend to draw a line at renaming the museum just because the business sense in me just constantly hypes around the concept of branding and changing museum. And 125 million, that bought him the title of Ken Griffin Museum of Science and Industry. What happens if in the future there is a donation of similar or greater size?
I think just holding off on that alone, that contingency, I think that's a ridiculous assumption.
Well, it's
To
not just that contingency; it's the branding also. But just also, what happens when you change?
I think you're hyping too much on branding because you see a lot of things similar to this. You see this; it's a very common thing, both in you see it with stadium, you see it as naming rights. Like you see that
Yeah,
happen a lot, and it's hyper common.
yeah. And I've
Admittedly,
always disagreed with it. I've personally always disagreed with it, and that's just me. I could be horribly antiquated, but hey,
and to be honest, at this scale, in my opinion, at 125 million, that has to be one of the single largest private donations for a museum ever. And I understand like the whole premise of donating and getting things named after you, like wings and things like that. I think this is personally, I think it's equivalent to the amount he spent. But I do hope that this money helps preserve this institution for a long time because as someone who grew up going there on field trips, and I went there for my birthday last year actually because they
yeah.
had the Pompeii exhibit.
Oh yes, yes, I remember you talking about that. That was very fun. So, fun fact: I don't know if it's the highest donation to a museum ever, but it does match the highest donation ever given to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, which was also 125 million given in 2021
Bye.
uh, by Oscar Tang,
Ah, okay.
uh, a retired financier. Now, here's the other question of this, Justin. With 125 million on the board,
Mm-hmm.
do you think that with the renaming, uh, the museum should have held out for more, or should it be, or would a smaller number have also gotten Mr. Griffin the name? Do you think he could have gotten this for less?
No, I think very, very much that they had negotiations and that they settled on this amount specifically. This was the this was the probably the low amount that the museum administrators asked for.
Mm-hmm.
If I had to guess, I would imagine negotiations maybe started at 1 billion or even 500 million and that
Mm-hmm.
they were eventually negotiated down. But I still think that is an incredibly large sum to just try and wrap your head around and try and like
Yeah. Oh yeah. And for those of you out there who are think 1 billion is an astronomical number, the current sitting net worth of Kenneth C. Griffin is 37.8 billion US dollars. So it is, well, $1 billion would be a sizable donation to him. It would be something he could afford, and thus something the museum could have asked for in their negotiations. I just want to keep that perspective for everyone, just because we are talking about, the 125 million here versus what the museum might have asked for.
yeah, so it really is something that it poses an interesting dilemma. I know you and I sit on different sides of it, but
Yeah,
in my opinion, with people like him that are sitting on these hoards of wealth, this
yeah,
is a phenomenal usage of it in to a degree. Like the argument of providing food and shelter is always
Yeah,
number one,
yeah,
but
yeah. Yeah.
educational resources is never a bad avenue.
Yeah. There are a few things I would rather see him spending his money on, and it is, I do, genuinely like want more of these people to spend more money on things like this, and if this is the cost, then I accept it. But I am always against, I am always against change. I am always against
I have a
rebranding.
prominent example I can give you.
Wrigley Field has been Wrigley Field long since Wrigley Gum has walked away.
The Guggenheim Museum, named after Solomon Guggenheim,
Mm.
after his foundation helped establish the museum. So,
Yeah. Well, see, I think that's slightly different because he established the museum. It didn't have a pre-existing
well,
brand.
his foundation did. He died before it was fully completed.
Yeah. Yeah, but I'm just saying the Guggenheim Museum didn't used to be known as, I don't know, the New York Museum of Modern Art, and then his foundation donates to it and becomes the Guggenheim Museum. It was born the Guggenheim Museum
Actually,
and
it
had
did go through a naming restructure.
see, we're getting into the history with alternate things that aren't on the article. This is where the debate leads us as we as
Yeah.
we as we attempt to argue the ethics of money and cultural heritage, and how they are tied together. Yes. Thank you, capitalism.
It was originally opened as the Museum of Non-Objective Painting in 1939. But on that note, thank you guys for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Let us know your thoughts, and we'll argue about it later. Goodbye.